I'm with Itamar Marcus from Palestinian Media Watch. Now, Itamar, what is Palestinian Media Watch?
We were founded in 1996, and the goal was to find out what's really happening in the internal Palestinian world. We use the media as a window to Palestinian society. We study everything from sporting events, speeches by leaders, school books, everything we can to get a sense of where the leadership is bringing the people. And there are two different worlds. There's the English language world that they're telling the journalists, they're telling the people in the UK, and there's the Arabic language world, which is very, very different. And that's the world that's critical. We want to know what's happening really amongst Palestinians.
So you actually analyze the news that's coming out of the Palestinian Authority?
Exactly. So, for example, we study the sports pages of the Palestinian media, and you'd wonder what could we be finding on the sports pages. Well, it turns out that the sports pages are a window to the heart and soul of the Palestinian Authority. Since the Intifada period, 2000 to 2005, the Palestinian Authority has been naming sporting events after terrorists who've killed the largest number of Israelis. So, for example, we've had sporting events named the Ministry of Education, not just the sporting events. The Ministry of Education had a football tournament, which they named the Abdul Basit Udeh Championship Cup. And this is a suicide bomber who killed 31 people at a Passover Seder. Just a few years ago, there was a basketball tournament for girls named the Dalal Mughrabi Cup. Dalal Mughrabi was a bus hijacker who was involved in the murder of 37 Israelis in the bus hijacking. 12 of them were children. So you've got a mass murder of children, and then the Ministry of Education, again, has a sporting event named after. Recently, the most recent murder in Israel was an Israeli father of 6 named Rabbi Gabriel Shevach, who was murdered in a drive-by shooting. And a month later, Israel captured, and in the end, in the shootout, killed the terrorist who did the shooting. And within a month, there were 3 sporting events named after that killer. So we're analyzing the messaging of the Palestinian leadership to their people through culture, through sports, through crossword puzzles, through all the controlled Palestinian Authority frameworks. And it's terrifying, the messaging that's going to young Palestinian children.
Of course, it's the World Cup at the moment, and they even put pressure on Jerusalem and Argentina, didn't they?
Absolutely. They threaten and kill Israelis, and then they threaten, literally, Messi. Jibril Rajoub, the head of the Palestinian Sports Authority, the head of their Palestine Football Association, he told people to take pictures of Messi, to take shirts of Messi, to rip them, to burn them. I mean, and then following his public statements, of course, there were actual threats. And I don't blame the Argentinian team for not coming. If you've got leadership of the PA, of the Palestinian Authority, telling people that you are a target, you don't know what crazy person is then going to come and is going to actually commit a terror attack against you here, or even back in Argentina or in Russia. So who needs that? So it's tragic for the Palestinians that their leadership is like this, but it's tragic for Israel and the world as well.
Now, we've seen protests recently at the Gaza border, and in one day about 60 people were killed. Is there more to this story than meets the eye?
Yes, it's tragic that the Hamas, at this point in Gaza, it's Hamas, is using people as human shields. And now we know this, not only as human shields, but even worse than that. First of all, Hamas announced that 50 of the 60 people who were killed were their own operatives, meaning their own terrorists. The Islamic Jihad, another terror organization, announced that 3 of the killed were theirs. So it's possible that there were 7 people who were inadvertently killed by Israel because they were firing at so many terrorists who actually, some of them carried guns, some of them were planting bombs, some of them were trying to cut the fence so that masses of people could come across into Israel. So this was serious terror going on. What's more significant is one of the Palestinian Authority leaders, a few days later, in an interview, said it was a win-win situation. For if they get through the border and invade Israel with thousands of people, then we've succeeded. But if Israel is forced to shoot us, then we've also succeeded, because Israel gets bad press. So it's clear the entire thing, including the killings, was orchestrated by the Hamas leadership just for the purpose of the PR win that they wanted to have by having dead people. Now, that is outrageous. They are sending people to die in order that they can have good PR. And one of the people who said this was no one less than a person named Mahmoud al-Habash, who is Mahmoud Abbas's personal advisor on Islam, and he's head of the Sharia courts in all of the Palestinian Authority. He said on television that he criticized Hamas. Why are you sending people to be killed just so that you can have a good PR story?
Palestinians say it's a peaceful demonstration, and of course everyone has the right to demonstrate. Is it peaceful, and what sort of things are they actually doing at the fence?
It's not peaceful by any sense of the word. Just one thing, for example, the latest type of terror, and the Palestinians have initiated so many different types of terror internationally. The latest terror is, we're calling it the kite terror. The Palestinians are attaching bottles of gasoline, kerosene, to kites. They're flowing them into Israel, and tens of thousands of acres of fields, of agricultural fields, and nature reserves have all been burned by these fires. Some of them have landed right next to communities. Some of them have landed inside communities. This is terror. Just yesterday, we had 31 different fires that had to be put out because of this, and this is absolutely terror. In addition, there have been people who came to the fence with guns, or people who came to the fence trying to plant bombs at the fence. So it's terror in every possible description. It's terror, and Israel has to fight terror.
Is terrorism evolving? Because this is quite a unique thing, isn't it?
It's exactly. Terrorism is evolving. Every time the especially Hamas, but the Palestinian Authority as well, they try a new terror. Israel comes up with a new response to that terror, and then they come up with something else. The terrorists from Gaza were getting out and doing all sorts of terror, so they started building tunnels under Gaza, and a number of Israelis were killed during the previous war. They tried to actually tunnel into Israeli towns, where they'd come in and do massacres of civilians. This was their actual plan. Since then, so Israel has now developed a special kind of a mechanism that can actually detect the tunnels, and Israel is now destroying the tunnels when they cross over inside Israel. So they do the tunnels. We put a fence, they do tunnels. We figure out a solution for the tunnels, and now they're doing kites. And then we'll come up with the kites, and then they'll do something else. You're absolutely right. It's evolving. I hate to say it, the same way bacteria evolves. When you find one cure for one bacteria, and then you use it too much, and it evolves. Well, that's what's happening. We're finding one cure for terror, for a certain terror, and then another terror evolves.
How does Israel discourage people from coming to the border fence?
Israel announces it. Israel sends leaflets over. Israel makes it very clear there isn't a Palestinian in Gaza who knows that the border fence is an area that Israel, for security reasons, has to keep free of all people, because you never know who's going to be that terrorist who's going to come across. You let people roam around, then one of them could come through. We've had, for example, kidnapping of Israeli soldiers, Gilad Shalit, and murder of Israeli soldiers by infiltrators. So when you have to keep infiltrators out, when you know that the region is ruled by a terror organization, Hamas, let's not misunderstand Hamas. Hamas, in their charter, says and writes that these are the words of their charter. Hamas is looking forward to fulfill Allah's promise, however long it may take. And then there's a quote from a hadith, an Islamic tradition, that talks about the extermination of Jews. Hamas is looking forward to exterminate all Jews. That has nothing to do with Palestinianism. It has nothing to do with Palestinian nationalism. It has nothing to do with land. It has to do with Hamas interpreting that source literally, that the hour of resurrection won't come until Muslims exterminate the Jews. That's what Israel's dealing with Hamas. So Hamas uses all sorts of smokescreens for the international community. They tell their people, they tell the press, so we're doing this for land, we're doing this in a response to what Israel did. They'll make all excuses up. But listen to what they write, listen to what they tell their people. We've heard so many sermons that talked about the extermination of Jews from Hamas, from the PA as well, by the way. It's an Islamic source that they're all or using and interpreting in a literal sense to apply to today. So when Israel is dealing with both the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, who both are using sources to tell their people that there's an Islamic goal to exterminate the Jews, well, you're dealing with a big problem, because a lot of people, you don't even need 100 of people to take it seriously. You need 2% to take that message seriously, and we've got thousands and thousands of terrorists who believe that every single Jew that they kill is an act of worship of Allah.
Now, a little baby died in one of the demonstrations, and a medic has also died in another. Is there more to this than the story?
Well, absolutely. The little baby, it turns out, died in not even related to what was going on near the fence, and the family was paid 8,000 shekel to say that he died because of gas or something else at the fence. So this is typical. It's typical manipulation by terror organizations who are trying to get sympathy for themselves and trying, again, to create a smokescreen for their terror. The story of the medic is a more tragic story. It seems like she was being actually working as a medic, but she was also being manipulated by Hamas. There were films that Israel has released showing her throwing smoke bombs and other things in the direction of Israel. So she was a medic, but she was also involved in the violence. It's also possible that one of the bullets going after an actual terrorist might have hit her. When you bring yourself into a terror zone, especially when one of the tactics that the Hamas was using was burning endless numbers of tires to create a smokescreen so that they could do their terror. There were tires burning everywhere. If you looked at it, you thought the whole country was going up in smoke. So they create these tires, they create the smokescreen, and then when civilians are killed, they blame Israel. Well, in fact, they're the ones to blame, both for the terror and for the smokescreens that makes it just impossible to figure out who the terrorist is.
So the Palestinian Authority is encouraging people to go out and be terrorists. Are they paying these people?
Every person, whether they were in the Palestinian Authority salary before or just a regular individual who goes out and does a terror attack against Israel and then gets arrested, begins to receive a Palestinian Authority salary. And the salary starts at 1,400 shekel a month and goes up to 12,000 shekel a month, which is four times the average Palestinian salary. So you can do terror, and then if you're in jail long enough, you're going to have an incredibly high salary and come out of jail very, very rich.
Does Israel actually help the Gazan people?
The great myth is that Israel has a blockade on Gaza. Israel has a blockade from the sea because we know that Hamas is a terror organization, and we know they've tried to smuggle in serious weapons and missiles, and we know they're using missiles against Israel. They've actually succeeded in smuggling in certain ones. On the other hand, Israel has an open fence and dozens, if not hundreds sometimes a day, of trucks come into Gaza from Israel. Even during the period that Egypt had closed down its border completely, Israel continued to send in hundreds of trucks a day with all the supplies, all the food, everything that they can't produce in Gaza is being brought in. Some of it Israeli produced, some of it imports from other countries. There's literally nonstop traffic of trucks bringing things into Gaza. Israel had to stop giving them cement for a while because the cement, which was supposed to be used to rebuild buildings in Gaza, was being used to build tunnels. You need an enormous amount of cement to dig these deep tunnels with walls that were quite thick. And that's where the cement was going. So Israel is supposed to supply Hamas with cement so that they can create tunnels, so that they can tunnel into an Israeli village and massacre civilians? Absolutely not. So Israel has stopped for a while, and now we're trying to, I think we've created some kind of a mechanism where the cement is going to specific groups or specific builders directly and trying to keep it out of the hands of the Hamas. Of course, it's really quite impossible. So as we know, Hamas is still building tunnels, and as we know, every month or so, or sometimes even in quicker frequency, Israel ends up announcing that we've destroyed another tunnel that has tunneled into Israel.
So we hear a lot these days about fake news. So really what the West is receiving is fake news from the Palestinian Authority. Absolutely.
The whole myth of Palestinians as victims is all fake news. Yes, they're victims, but they're victims of their own leaders. It's their own leaders who've made them suffer. It's their own leaders who've created the conflict with Israel. It's the own leaders who prevent them from reaching an agreement with Israel. The Palestinian leadership makes their own people suffer, and then they blame Israel. And the people think that Israel's at fault.
What's your prayer, finally, for the people in Gaza?
My prayer for all the people of the region is that terror will stop. When terror stops, we'll be able to take away the security borders and have people start meeting on a face-to-face basis. When people meet face-to-face, when people play sporting events together, when people have cultural events together, then they learn to respect and embrace other people as human beings. And that's the prayer, is that terror will stop, because once the Palestinian Authority initiated terror, once the Hamas initiated terror, once that stops, we'll be able to break down those security fences. And of course, it needs to have the hate education has to stop. The school books have to change. The salaries to terrorists, all of this has to go away. And then we can break down the borders, and then people can meet, and then we can have build a peaceful future for the whole region.
Okay, Itamar, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.